started, and if there's a problem, I'll interrupt. Otherwise, talk away.
Just flipping through my screens to see what's worked here.
So, just one more thing, I guess. Can I try and share my screen with you guys real quick, and then make sure that's working?
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah, I need to test that.
Started, and if there's a problem,
I'm gonna hit go live. I've never done this before, so.
Just flipping.
All right, so I've got your whiteboard up. So, just one more thing.
I think we are
Can
live.
I try and share my screen with you guys?
I think we're live.
Wow.
Hold on.
No,
Did I go?
we're not.
I hit the go.
Okay.
Jumping the gun. I'm so
guys.
excited.
Well, this is what we
So
do in the
excited.
green room behind the scenes.
So
Flipping
I've got
back to
your
the intro
live.
screen. And now we're live. Welcome to Faz Radio. We gave you a little preview of what the green room sounded like as I was testing the various various scenes that we have in OBS here. Hopefully I didn't divulge anything. But yes, welcome to Faz Radio Live. Thank you guys. We have a really cool show today. My goal has always been to get a Gala Games dev to kind of tell us how they do their work and just do a little bit, give us some insight. I've seen this on some other games that I've funded online, and I've really liked those things. And so I believe I've managed to con at least one Gala dev into going with me on this. So hopefully we don't ruin it for later. Anyway, we have Jehosephat from Gala Games on today. And he's going to, first of all, hopefully he can tell us who he is, and then we could start getting into this GYRI thing that we've teased everybody with. You're up.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for that generous welcome. It's great to be on here. I was gonna say, so I'm Jehosephat, and I think I'm probably one of the super early members of your server here as well. I started playing Town Crush. Yeah. So I got involved with Gala back in 2020, maybe like late summer, something like that. Playing Town Crush and kind of getting involved in the community. Got pretty involved in like competitive Town Crush and built some tools for planning your Town Crush town. Town Star. Have I been saying Town Crush this whole time? That's what I got on my mind. But in any case, I got involved and they liked kind of some of the stuff I was doing, and I liked what they're doing. So we connected, and now I'm doing development there. And so I did a little bit of development work on the Series 1 box, as well as the Frank Miller art. And then I moved over to work on the chain team and building GYRI. I'm going to go ahead and call it GYRI. I know there's a number of pronunciations out there. That's the one that
is that an official name?
It's not an official name. So I do think that the official name is probably, I hate to use this word, but soon, very soon. So yeah.
Every
No matter.
time you say that word, Old Man Smithers dies just a little bit inside.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? It's hard not to say it because there's a lot of things that are coming soon. But just add that to the list.
Well, first things first. I think somebody complained that we still have a horrible echo. Could somebody tell us in the Faz
Boy.
Radio chat that if we still have it, or in YouTube? I don't even have the YouTube channel up. I'm very unprepared today.
I'm listening to it, and I don't hear an echo on my end.
All right, then it might have been from earlier. Remember, we are delayed about 20 seconds, so it could be that. Anyway, yeah, so I have made a special screen just for Jehosephat to... Oh, cool, no echo. Special screen just for Jehosephat to draw pictures on. Let's see, is it this one? It's this one. It's empty right now. And we're going to get into it. Before we start, Titan, did you have any initial questions? Or I think I probably cut you off in the beginning.
No worries. I appreciate it. No, I'm just really excited because I've always been on the front end of things. I'm not by any means a web expert or a dev. I've made a lot of websites and continue to, and I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. So I'm here to learn and listen more than anything for this back-end stuff. It's really exciting to me. And I have a ton of questions myself about GYRI, and if I can pop in once in a while and throw a noob question at you, that would be great.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I had some slides, but they're terrible anyways. They're very black and white. But I'm going to kind of run through, I guess, a few things, and I'm going to focus on
And
Town Crush and how we integrated GYRI into Town Crush, and kind of talk about the different things that we, what our goals were when we were doing that, both kind of from a technical standpoint as well as just kind of really understanding the best way to, have games communicate with the chain, have games write data to the chain. So let me just.
All right, no pressure. No pressure.
Yeah, it's a lot, right?
You forgot how it all worked now, right?
Yeah. So like early Town Crush, you've probably seen, we kind of went through a few iterations of Town Crush with some slightly different features with the way things worked, and we're basically testing out some different things each time, and kind of performance every time as well, right? With some different ways to go about it, and see if I can drop this in here.
I'm wondering if you can copy and paste pictures into this thing.
That's what I was gonna try to do here. Let me see if this works. Excuse the pause. I can insert picture. See, it like makes a little thing when I try to paste something in there, but it's not happening.
Well, that's a bummer. If you can post it in chat, I can pop it up in a window and just. I'm sharing a screen, so I can just move that over the top. You won't see it, but everyone else will.
Okay, I think I figured it out. Hey, there we go. It's loading in there.
Oh, there we go. Now? Yeah.
All right, so there it is.
It's a bit off center. Wait, maybe let me move.
Feel free to drag it if you can.
Oops. How do I make?
Is that better?
Yeah, actually, that's a lot better. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard for me to.
Your screen might be bigger than mine. That's probably why.
Yeah. Okay. If that's pretty visible, though, you can kind of see this is sort of the, I guess. Oh, there you go. Sort of kind of final architecture, I guess, if you will, of the different pieces that come together, right? And so let me just talk about the overall structure here. There's kind of these four main pieces, right? And the chain is really one of the back-end pieces. So the Town Crush client itself, which is written in Godot, it really just has a piece of code. It's just a class in Godot that does all the talking to the data stores, which is either the platform or GYRI at the end of the day,
really
right?
quick,
So
what is Godot?
yeah, Godot is like Unity. It's a game engine, a game development engine.
Okay.
Right, and that's pretty much Warren Marshall's gig there. He put together. Shoot, well, sorry that the graphic is not super clear. I can try and do some drawing, but it's kind of a complex diagram.
Just point and talk. Just use them as talking points.
Yeah. Sure. So in any case, that's this part here. So here's the client, right? And we also have a layer between the client and kind of the two back-end pieces, right? And that's our game server right here. And that has two major.
Is that the same thing as the node?
It's not the node. So this is just really a web server, effectively. It's an API for the game to talk to, basically.
So the nodes aren't implemented yet, probably.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, there's not going to be. I don't really have much information about where we're at with that. I could tell you a little later on. I have a couple items about kind of our infrastructure.
Okay.
Where it's going, where it is, and how that will make using nodes more possible in the future. If that makes sense.
Okay.
So yeah, so we've got this layer here, which is it's a game server. It's could be kind of a pass through, but we've got a little bit of business logic in there. So if we want to do a little something extra in terms of validation or just kind of checking some of these calls. And again, I don't know how readable it is, but some of the things that the Town Crush client is doing here is, getting profiles off the chain.
I need to make this a little bit bigger for people.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Do what you got to do.
And let's move can we move these lines?
I'll redo them here. I erased them. Sorry. So,
I'm going to make this a little bit wider. I've never, ever used this tool. So I literally just Googled whiteboard on
okay.
Google. So, okay.
All right. Let me make my window a little bit bigger. Okay. So, all right. So here's the client. That's the game engine. So that's where all the fun magic with all the tiles moving around happens. And that's going to talk to this game server, which is really just, a web server that exposes an API to the game, right? And so it's that API lets the game talk to both the platform about like our typical Gala user information, like your Ethereum balance or your other profile information, like your your screen name or your little profile picture, things like that. Or it can use the chain service class to talk to GYRI, right? And that's over here. And I'll break this down a little bit because the GYRI box here is very simplified. I'm showing here that we have a couple of channels, and I don't know how much it's been talked about, but the underlying technology under GYRI is Hyperledger Fabric, right? So it's a network of peers. It's is built on Go programming language, but it supports writing chain code, which is what we call contracts, in a number of languages, including TypeScript, which is what we are using. But it's flexible so that if a third-party developer really knows their Go and they want to write their contract in Go, that is supported. So that's kind of the overall architecture, or kind of like topology of Town Crush with the backend pieces, right? And you can see also here there's some things that the platform can do to talk to GYRI in terms of like fulfilling purchases or distributing assets, whether that's ERC20 style tokens or NFTs. In any of the same way that we do distribution normally, right? But we can just do it right onto GYRI. So, all right, so let me back up a little bit. I'm a little out of order, but this is probably good to get this kind of in front of you first. But I just want to say some of the things that we were testing out, like with Town Crush, right? So one of the main things we tested out was a bunch of different styles of purchasing, right? And so you may have seen like a GYRI native token, which for Town Crush was test, right? And when I say native, I guess it's not like ETH is native to Ethereum. I just mean as opposed to like an ERC20. It's basically like the equivalent of Town or Silk or something like that, right?
So I saw in your in the white paper for GYRI, not white paper, medium for GYRI, something about we're going to have a new token called Test. Is that supposed to take the place of, say, Town Coin in your tests or something?
Well, I mean, at least for Town Crush, that was what we called our test token, right? The token we used on the network at the time. And again, it's supposed to be, that's representing kind of the same thing that an ERC20 would be on Ethereum, right? But if we were testing another game, we could call the token that it uses test. We could call it anything really, but I think that the article is really referencing what we were doing with Town Crush.
Okay.
Right. So there's not a again, kind of like, Ethereum network has ETH, and that's like the truly native token, right? Like there isn't something like that on GYRI. Okay. Just to clear that up. So some different purchasing scenarios, like paying with and I'm just going to say a GYRI token, and that's what I mean by like test or something that's on the GYRI network as like an ERC20 token, but exchanging one of those tokens for another token, so that would be like spending 100 tests to get a chicken coop NFT. We tested out spending Ethereum tokens like Town on the platform and getting a GYRI token, and that could be, I think we tested it with NFTs again, but that could be an ERC20 there too. We also tested using an Ethereum token on the platform to purchase in-game inventory items like lives or the executioner chickens, right? So that's like a direct, like in-game asset kind of thing, as opposed to a token that's transferable. We also tried some things with in-game transactions using actual tokens, which would be, akin to, being in Town Star and hitting a button to spend Town to like, speed up the crafting of something, right? And that actually, I mean, that was one of the things that revealed some weaknesses with our early architecture that we were able to solve as part of this test. So that was all the kind of like purchasing stuff. You guys have any questions about that at this point?
Yeah, actually, I do. So one of the things, and we've had several little micro conversations about this in a couple of channels. You're mentioning like a lot of these microtransactions and things flying all over the place at the speed of light at no cost, right? Which is fantastic. Here's the thing. How do I pull that data into my tax software or into a spreadsheet so that I'm able to figure the taxes and see my transactions and verify all that? Is that going to be something that's going to be easy, or is that something that will add to the Thune list.
I don't see that. I don't think that Gala Games is going to take a position on your taxes, because that's like asking.
No, I'm not
Hasbro.
asking him to take a position on the taxes. I'm saying,
what I'm saying is,
can I push a button and download to a spreadsheet all of my transactions and have it be listed out in whatever token denomination that is used on there? If I sell town for Gala or sell town for an NFT, and I import that somewhere, anywhere,
this doesn't appear
even
to be
into
related.
just like
This doesn't
Google.
appear to be
No,
related.
it is, because he's talking about how all these transactions are going. I have to be able to see that.
Sure. So the early version of that, with that we tested with Town Crush, was the Block Explorer. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to see that. That was obviously pretty rudimentary. It only really gave you the first, I'm trying to remember, maybe 100 or 1,000 transactions, just to give people an idea of like, here are the actual transactions. You're seeing what's on the blockchain. Part of our efforts right now is a combination of basically an indexer as well as what we're calling the GYRI API. So rather than there being like a direct, if you wanted to get that data, you would kind of have to try and go query the chain directly, right, through one of these API endpoints. And, that can get to be heavy traffic on the chain, but also not very user friendly. So we have an indexer that will, just similar to what an indexer does for Ethereum, right? It's gathering all that data up in a way that it's queryable from the outside, without putting stress on the chain itself, right? And so the GYRI API then would be an API into that data, right? And I think the first stage of that is going to be, games and developers are going to use that API to expose things like, people's progress and leaderboards and things like that. Also, it would be used to gather data for distribution based on people's performance, things like that.
Is all this stuff going to be public? Like if I play a game of Mirandus or something, and Mirandus is using GYRI, is somebody going to be able to follow along in my game somehow while looking at the blockchain?
Well, I mean, you can see everything on Ethereum, right? If we put Mirandus on Ethereum,
well, you'd see
that,
what
right?
NFTs I acquired, what I minted and stuff. But I'm curious, actually. Let me reword the question. Are
Sure.
you planning to have so many indicators stored on the blockchain that you can reconstruct a game from the blockchain?
Well, that's game dependent,
what
right?
current
So
building I'm in, or
yeah.
I know. I mean, is because you're writing the API for GYRI and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So
well, yeah. So yeah, exactly.
You're probably making it possible so that such a thing could possibly be done. So that's
Sure.
what I'm curious. If I honestly, what I'm envisioning is a lot of people who would make it their sole job to just find out what people are doing in their games just by querying the blockchain, and that's entertainment and fun for the whole family right there.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I don't necessarily have a complete answer. I could tell you that at the very least, it's going to be game specific, right? So if it's an FPS, like you're not going to be putting every bullet fired on the blockchain, right? Even if GYRI is super fast and we can do ridiculous number of transactions, you still would just never want that. Like that's just too much data. It's not worth, it still costs something to send data over the wire to record data.
Is that transaction speed a secret, or is it something we can know?
Well, and again, I think that might be up to the game developer. So, each game contract is going to live in a game-specific channel. So, it's kind of a good question. Like, I think that some, game developers might want to not expose their game on-chain game data to the public.
Well,
right?
what I meant about transaction speed is XRP. We know can settle a transaction in 4 seconds, and it can do so many transactions per minute, per hour, whatever. Do you have benchmarks like that have already set up and are allowable for people to know just yet, or is that still all like under development?
We have some benchmarks. I think it's kind of a tricky question for GYRI because we actually can we have levers to change that per channel, right? So if you wanted your game to run very fast, small transactions, you can set that up, and it's really, really fast. You know, definitely in the thousands of transactions per second range. But maybe you want your game to only write once a minute and a really big fat chunk of data, right? Like it would be a slower transaction speed, but that's kind of what you want, right? So that's one of the really huge benefits we have with Hyperledger Fabric and the way we're building this is that transaction speed isn't the end all be all, right? It can be if you want it to be. You know, if you want your game to be, you know, recording really, really small events really fast. I don't think a lot of games are going to want that, but you know, there's a range of ways to configure each channel so that it really, really suits the game, right? And that's, you know, I'll admit that's something we're still kind of learning how to dial in, right? Like and understanding what a game needs and what a game wants, how they want to do it. I mean, in theory, they could have multiple channels for their game, right? For different kinds of data writing, even. It's pretty flexible.
Okay.
So if I'm understanding this, this could maybe explain. A lot of people have questions, you know, when. So each of these channels has to be programmed independently of each other one, even if it's the same game. Then, like you were saying, if Spidertanks wants 5 channels to display different data, all of those have to be programmed independently, yet interactive at the same time.
Well, I don't think multi-channel is a very likely to be a common architecture choice. I'm just saying it's possible, and we certainly have not. We don't. Well, aside from the fact that we have an assets channel that's, you know, more like your uh, just NFTs and FTs and very basic operations that you would want to do with assets. That's a separate channel from the Town Crush channel, right? But all games and a number of utilities would have access to the assets channel. Um, but I understand, like, and actually that is a piece of complexity that we are kind of trying to figure out, right? So like if, you know, let's say in Town Crush you want to lock up an asset, right? Because they're using it for a match. Then the Town Crush channel would have to talk to the assets channel, and that's not super straightforward. It would have to at least be able to read the assets channel and say, okay, there's a lock on there, right? But we may have to have a different service kind of a higher level up to actually do the locking first, right? So there's especially, and that almost becomes more of a game design complexity, right? Where like the game has to say, okay, how do I want to like sequence these events, right? Lock, do some stuff, unlock, those kinds of things, or you know, if we wanted to implement in-game trading of assets, right? Then things start to get really interesting with the multiple channels, and it's not so much multiple channels within a particular game, even though that's an option. It's talking to the asset channel, understanding the state of assets, the ownership of assets. That starts to get kind of tricky. Does that kind of answer what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, that helps because a lot of us are always wondering, you know, boy, you know, from a noob level like me, I'm like, you know, what the heck is taking so long here? And I think you're doing a really good job, especially with that graphic. That helped me a ton. Understand that, holy cow, I mean, there is a lot of button poking going on to try and just get your NFT to be able to be read properly within that game channel.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be complex, especially depending on what you're wanting to do to manipulate that asset or use it in the game. You know, you start to talk about things like leasing. You're really talking about a lot of like cross-channel traffic that you have to kind of figure out and plan for. And I think that's it's really not evident in this diagram, but like within the design of a channel and a chain code or contract, really there's a big piece of that is the data design, right? And understanding where the delineation is between different data objects and making sure we're not having collisions and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is I think a lot of people who are following along in the development of some of the mini games you have, Miranda's, Townstar, Town Crush, they don't exactly understand how complicated it is to do some things. And something, because I've been a dev for a while, something that I like to mention to my bosses whenever they start up a new project is whenever you start up a project for the first time, you're inventing all your tools that you work with later. Your code, your fixes, and all your development goes faster 2 months from now than it does the first week. The first week you're just throwing down just sample stuff, and you're like, how do we get this going? And then you gotta learn how to test your own tool, you test your own game, because each game's gonna have its own dedicated test setup.
Yeah, there's no question, and I think that's a pretty accurate description, right? And now I think we're really hitting that, starting to hit that hockey stick point, right? Of where all of those tools are feeling like they're in place and they're sufficient, and we've learned a lot, and that's Town Crush, I think, looks really simple on the outside, but the number of different things we were experimenting with on the back end and what we're learning from that and what we're evolving out of that, it really is. It's hard to describe, right? But you're exactly right. That's all about building up your tooling and your testing and your confidence in that you can develop on this platform in a straightforward way, and you're not just always trying to figure everything out every time.
Right, and then there's all sorts of balancing. Like I know Spidertanks was not originally designed to work with a blockchain. Neither was Townstar, and so their code is written in such a way that it's hard to get there from here. It's like how can you plug into this when this library isn't loaded yet? And how can you make a call to this if you're already currently making a call to that? I mean, the complexity of managing threads can get maddening for developers if your code isn't written correctly. And sometimes you have to go to the boss and you have to say, well, guys, boss, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to literally tear this out and rewrite it if you want it to work the way you want with any kind of speed. And of course, the boss just says something like, well, how quickly can you do that? It's like, well, I can do it cheap. I can do it cheap. I can do it fast, or I can do it right. Pick two.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing to note, like, none of these games are like just sitting on the shelf ready to be wired to GYRI, right? They're being developed. They're being expanded and enhanced and changed, and so it's not necessarily straightforward to just say like, okay, we need this from the chain exactly, and it's there's a lot of iteration, there's a lot of back and forth, and kind of like, okay, yeah, this would work for us, this wouldn't, and kind of like a sort of agile-ish development process where we're kind of showing them what we have. They're saying, yeah, that's 90% there, but we also need this other field to be saved. And if we save it on this object, we're going to have a collision, so maybe we need a new object or needs to go somewhere else. There's a lot of that stuff, and part of what's happening right now too for us is we're learning how to help developers learn to use GYRI, right? As much as we're continuing to develop it and tighten the bolts and make sure it's secure and ready for prime time, we're also trying to teach, our internal devs, if you're talking about Town Crush or third-party devs for other games, we're having to, help them learn how to use it. Because ultimately, in the long run, we want this to be basically an SDK that, a developer can kind of pick this up, write their own contract, and, make a proposal to join the chain. So yeah, there's a lot of pieces, and I think like this diagram is fairly complex, but then if you dig into just the GYRI box, like that gets pretty complicated under the hood too. You've got Fabric and you've got a number of other pieces there that take care of security and certificates, and that talk to the chain and provide an API to external services, like the game server, talks to an API around the contracts, and there's a lot of little pieces that I think I understand that it looks pretty simple on the outside, but there's quite a bit of complexity on the inside.
So I have a technical question. Well, maybe not as technical. How public do you plan to make this API? Is it just for internal use, or will people like me be able to have a crack at it? And because I can see, again, with Mirandus, if Mirandus is using this API, maybe I want to develop a third-party thing so that I could see if somebody's coming into my town and patronizing my store, rather than waiting for you guys to make some tool that emails me or texts me or does something in a way. I just want the API, man. When can I touch the API?
I hear that. Did old man Smithers ask you to ask
no,
that
that's
question?
just me. I'm just a...
Yeah.
I just do that.
No, yeah. I totally agree. And I think I'll go back to what I was talking about with, there's a couple of pieces, right? So like there's that query API that's should expose chain data in a broad way that people should be able to query in a way that, if you're just trying to see like, how many people went to this tavern or something like that, that might be something that is available. And again, the caveat there is, the game developer is probably going to have control over whether or what can be queried that way, right? They may not want you to be able to query certain things, and I think that's understandable.
That's called the Microsoft way.
Yeah, and I get it. It's not as decentralized as everybody would like, but I think it's going to be an interesting road as more and more third parties come and start to work on the chain, right, and work with the chain. So, I think I spent a lot of time thinking about the different genres of games, different types of games, and how they might implement a chain contract, right? Like what parts of Fall Guys would go on the chain, right, or things like that. You know what I mean? And it's tricky. You know what I mean? And I think different developers are probably going to be more or less cagey about what they expose. I think that's understandable, and I think that it might be
security matters too.
Naive to expect that every game is going to want to just like blow all their data wide open and let you query anything you want.
Security
that being
matters
said,
too.
I think we're going to have the
security matters because somebody could basically hack your API. When I've developed APIs, I've exposed honestly as little as fucking possible, because if people start trying to DDoS your API, you've got to make sure that your QA people have basically got to try to break the API and DDoS it themselves, or try to hack the API before they can make a single thing public, or else Gala's gonna get hacked big time. And that would, by extension, that'd be the node ecosystem. Can you imagine if you hack a node ecosystem that has 20,000 nodes in it? What you can make it do? I mean, you can make it be a virus. You could make it be a big, huge virus bot. Sorry about that, Titan. Go ahead.
No. What I was, I wanted to ask a question that like 3 sentences ago was a good segue, and then you guys turned it into the security thing.
That's
so
my fault.
Finish up that, and I'll circle back to my question.
I'll just add real quick. I think that's part of the reason that the query API is going to exist. For one, to shield the actual chain and nodes from that direct, like DDoS type attack. That doesn't mean the query API itself wouldn't be, a target of the same thing, but it would be, my understanding, I don't think we plan to expose any kind of write ability via that query API. It would be a read-only situation.
Well,
But
there's ways
even
to
saying that,
there's
well,
ways to separate that. You could basically make it so that that API reads from something that's updated by your regular API. That way, nothing ever gets to your regular API.
right. Yeah, and I mean, I think I mentioned it before, but certainly like with something like that, and certainly with everything that we've seen in the news lately, like security is a very, very, very high priority for what we're doing, and kind of another one of the like kind of when GYRI, answers is that we want to make sure this thing is tightened down, and hardened, right? We don't want to, you know, you never know uh, what's going to come at you. But we've got a lot of third party auditing, and we've got a lot of um, the kind of white hat stuff going on to make sure that we're not exposing the community to anything here. And but that takes time, and I hate to say it, but it just does. And even it's hard because when you're waiting for other parties to do some of those audits, you're kind of sitting there waiting too. We want to push it out the door. We want it to be ready. We want people to use it. But yeah.
Okay. So you kind of turned it back towards the segue I was going to jump in on there.
Nailed it.
A lot of the questions are around small part of it being the security, but how about bridging, right? So we've seen a couple of bridges just getting decimated out there with hacks lately. So how does GYRI handle both incoming and outgoing bridging? Am I going to be able to, I mean, obviously I'll still have to have ETH in the wallet, right? If I move to the ETH chain, but how do if I decide that I go to Bitrue and I buy 50,000 town coin and I want to throw it onto GYRI to use, how do I even do that? Do you guys have a separate bridge, or will it be integrated in the wallet somehow? How are you guys doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there will be a bridge, and you're absolutely right. Like we've seen bridges get hammered, and that's kind of what I just mentioned before. Why audits and just extreme amount of testing is so critical. I'll go ahead and just say that that's not from a technology standpoint. I'm not super expert on that piece. We've got some other really talented people that are working on the bridge. But I can tell you that, yeah, that's the idea is, this bridge service is going to let you, take your tokens from Ethereum to GYRI and the other way as well, right? Bridging both in and out.
Will that be on the Gala platform, or will I have to go somewhere else to bridge it and then move it?
I don't know that we have like a solid like UX yet for how that works. I think and I'll kind of claim ignorance here because I don't have as close eyes on that particular piece. I would imagine that's something we'd want to have on our platform, but I don't know for sure from a UX standpoint what that'll look like.
Hey, thanks though. I think I know me and probably the people listening appreciate that. People don't want to hear bullshit answers, right? If you don't know, you don't know. That's great. We can really still learn a ton from that. Go ahead, Faz. I know you had another one too coming up.
Yeah, we actually have a chat that only we can see, that we're all trying to kind of jockeying for questions here. We're beating poor Jehosephat to death here.
You're a popular guy. This is
Wow.
I told you, this is a really, really big thing. People are dying for information on this.
One guy mentioned in here, Chewbacca says, "Tech Talk is so way over my head," and that's fine. I really wanted to dig into the weeds on this, and if it takes, on-chain gaming or somebody or something like that to come and dumb this down, that's fine. People are going to over time be able to pick things out of this conversation and be able to find some really good information from it. But I feel that we just need to have this out there. So let's have the complicated conversation, and then people start referencing this and saying how this is really good information. I can tell this is really great information. Let me go back.
I hope so, yeah.
Let me go back and see my question here, because I'm doing like 5 things at once. It's not lost on me, by the way, that the resolution is really low on this. We just discovered how to record these shorts for Faz Radio, and the shorts have a much lower resolution. And when I went live before I switched it back, so I'll be posting a link on here with a better quality version of the picture, and I already have a better version of the picture on the CryptoFaz Academy Discord. Anyway, my next question was, great, so you guys are making GYRI. You're making your own blockchain. Why was GYRI a better choice than using another blockchain? I mean, why did you have to invent it yourself? What do you gain? What did you gain out of this? And is it? I won't ask if it's worth the time, because I think that's a bit above your pay grade. But if you could answer that too, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, to a certain degree, it's a business decision, right? I mean, and I think the other piece, at least for me, is we have a very specific vision of what we want a chain to do for us and for games and for music and movies too, right? And to me, at least, looking at other chains, and there are certainly some good options in terms of things like Polygon, and even maybe eventually Flare. But there's 2 things there. Like with Flare, for example, like if we wanted to build on Flare, we'd be in a pretty tight spot right now, right? If last July, when they were originally gonna release Flare, if we said, hey, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, we'd be in bad shape right now, right? So a piece of it is we have control of the timeline as much as we can control it. We're building it as fast as we can, but at least it's in our hands at the end of the day. I think that's a big piece. But we've certainly, I think even over the course of building GYRI, we've kind of continued to survey the landscape and say, if another chain pops up that just has everything we want, and can do everything we need it to, we would probably be willing to do that. We're very flexible, but that just hasn't happened. And so we've continued to work, and I'm very happy that we're sticking with GYRI. I think it gives us what we want, the flexibility, kind of what I was talking about before. I feel like it does exactly what we want for games, and that's exactly what we want, right? We want to be able to have a chain that gives games the power that they need to use the blockchain.
Oh, okay. So I have a quick follow-up to that. This might be above your pay grade, so I'm going to give you a lot of chances to get out of this stuff, because this is a tech talk. We're here to find out details and information, and I do not want people thinking that this guy here is saying official company policy. Jesse could overrule any damn thing he says.
Yes, absolutely.
At any time. But it seems to me that is GYRI going to be a public chain or a private blockchain? I'm kind of not understanding how it's really intended to be consumed by the world and by Gala.
I think the right phraseology is it's a public chain, but it's permissioned, right? So, whereas Ethereum is a public chain that is permissionless, right? Anybody can write a contract on Ethereum, right? Which has its pluses and its minuses. Whereas,
does this mean that you own the blockchain in some way?
Well, eventually it wouldn't be us, right? Eventually, it's partners, it's authorities on the chain, right? So over time, as third-party devs join the chain, as other entities join the chain, maybe other even node operators. And again, that's not. I don't want to like promise anything. That's how it's going to be, but that's the idea. Is that more and more entities have control, so it becomes more decentralized. That permissioned aspect of it, right?
Yeah, that's what I had heard before, and I keep having to. Titan and I have a lot of conversations behind the scenes, and I keep having to knock him down, and because he keeps on coming at me saying, "No, no, they're going to make this all private. No, no, you can't. It's not going to be like Ethereum at all." But I knew that there's a technical explanation here, and this sounds still quite consistent with what you guys are saying. But he did say here in chat here that it was originally put out in the medium that it was, quote, proprietary and private.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's different enough from a lot of the other models that maybe there isn't like a perfect like phrase to describe it. But that's, I think in my head, that's what I think of is public but permissioned, and those permissions are granted by the authorities on the chain. Right now, that's us, right? Because we're starting in a very centralized manner, but eventually there should be more authorities on the chain over time.
So you mentioned a few moments ago that GYRI is designed for and is going to be responsible for handling all the stuff with games and music and film. And another concern the community has brought up before is, okay, so this thing's going to be running the show for games, music, and film. Why do I have a node? How do the nodes fit into GYRI, and how are the nodes going to be utilized? Is it going to be different, or is it going to be the same as it is now?
Well, so yeah, and I guess that's the short answer is I don't know for sure. I think that we do envision the nodes participating in the chain, whether that's because it's interesting because in some ways these contracts are way more flexible and can be more complex and can do more interesting things than can be done cheaply on Ethereum, for example. So maybe running a contract on your node or something like that. Like maybe you have a peer that runs a certain contract that's takes a lot of storage space or it takes a lot of compute power, right? That might be something. And again, I'm definitely in the kind of abstract hypothetical right here. I don't have any like node plan sitting in front of me, but those are the kinds of things uh, that we're thinking about, right? And just basic validation of transactions could be something that we could do. And that's actually, we've done a lot since Town Crush in terms of our infrastructure using Kubernetes now instead of Docker for our peers. That should make it much easier to create workloads on nodes for that kind of stuff. So, but again, caveat, like that's definitely stuff that's down the road and definitely not on paper anywhere as even a definite plan. So but that's things I think about.
Is there a separate node team, or
there is? Yes.
Okay, and so you're not on that team, right?
Nope.
If you notice, I keep trying to give you outs here because I don't want.
I
really don't want people to feel like that this is really official stuff. But
yes.
You do have stuff, and you're a member of a specific team, and there's what 200, 400 employees at Gala Games. I mean, they're people out the wazoo.
Yeah, and maybe a good way to put it is like those are all things that I would love to see the nodes do for the chain, and I think could do for the chain potentially. So that being said, again, I don't have the nodes roadmap, so I don't know if that's on there or when that's on there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's on there somewhere.
Well, again, it's about that perception, and the reason that I ask that is I've been hammering a lot lately, trying to see things from the other side, kind of where we're sitting from the outside. And we started with founders nodes, and they said, "Woohoo! Yay! All these founders nodes are going to run all the games." And then they came out with individual game nodes, and people went, "Oh, well, okay." And then we fast forward to today, and we have GYRI chain that's amazing and wonderful and powerful and all knowing, omnipotent. And then we kind of sit back and go, well, why the hell do I have a node then? So I was asking that question just to kind of see if you could throw any insight into how these two are going to marry together to make GYRI, the nodes, and Gala more powerful.
It might be why in 2022, when you buy a car, before 2022, when you buy a car, you get like seat warmers and air conditioner and stuff like that. After 2022, they have the seat warmers turned off unless you pay more. So,
oh my God, BMW already did that.
That's probably, I mean, and that's as a dev for many years, I've done a lot of features, and I'm like, okay, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and then the boss takes a look at it. He goes, no, that's going to be a higher price tier. And I'd be like, well, that needs to be done on the lower tier. And they're like, okay, find a way to make it on a higher price tier. So that's inevitably, in my opinion, how the nodes are structured. And they're probably structured for scaling purposes. I mean, if you have everything running on founders nodes and you only have 50,000 founders nodes, that's it. That's your limit. Because they said that they're not going to make any more. But if then you come up with the concept of a Townstar node, a Spidertank node, and so on, now you can scale them out indefinitely, which is you're prepared for supreme popularity. Otherwise, then you'd be stuck, and then some other game would surpass you. So I can see why they do it, but at the same time, I'm sure that there might be some additional unsavory reasons behind that. But I don't think Jehosephat's going to comment on those.
No, and again, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate or throw a gotcha out there. I'm truly trying to understand how all of this is going to go together, right? So your founders nodes will generate the Gala, but then it's going to be put on the GYRI chain in a treasure chest, which then is going to be accessible on GYRI chain. And then if I take it, so I'm just kind of wondering how all that's going to marry together. And the uses, like if they come out with a Mirandus node, right? If they decide to throw a Mirandus node out there, it might be running the game, but I thought GYRI was going to be running the game in a channel. So I'm trying to figure out how these are separate but the same, and how they're going to work together, and what's going to do what and when and how. And maybe that's just too big of a question for a tiny conversation here. I don't know.
Well, let me try and separate two things that I think maybe would help, right? So running the game is a pretty broad concept, right? So there's a game server, say, that does a lot of the workload for a game, right? Because we said earlier, like a game, especially if you think about like an FPS or something that's got a ton of data moving around, like we're not putting that all on the chain. There's going to be some kind of game server probably that is doing the math and working on physics and stuff like that, right? So that's one potential workload. And and then the chain stuff itself would be a separate workload, right? So that might be like when a Town Crush match gets recorded, that's a GYRI workload, right? Because that's happening on the chain. That would be, to me, that's a separate thing, right? And you might have, again, this is, let me just say, like, very hypothetical, but like you might have your founders node doing GYRI chain stuff, or it might be doing game server stuff, right? Those are two separate things.
Well,
So I don't know if that helps kind of clarify a little bit.
That's a good question, and is that something that has been determined? I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but do we know what the founders nodes will be doing? Will they be doing what Townstar and Spidertank nodes will be doing, and so on, with an option or something?
I don't know on that one. Yeah, and I would say that like a lot of it is just going to depend. Kind of what I was talking about earlier. What does a game want? What does a game need? Right? Like so, Town Crush doesn't have much game server logic, right? It really just does a lot of talking in the chain and a lot of client logic, right? So that wouldn't probably need a game server workload on a node, right? It's you know what I mean. But it might
Not
need
yet.
some a GYRI load or something like that. But another game that like again like an FPS might need a huge game server load, right? A ton of storage, a ton of compute for physics or whatever else. But maybe it only writes to the chain once every 10 minutes when the end of a round is done or something like that. So, yeah. So, and I think to your point, Faz, right? Like, so if we start doing things like that, then maybe 50,000 founders nodes isn't enough, right? And so certain games might need their own nodes. I don't know. That's hypothetical, but that makes sense to me what you described as a
From one
scenario.
side, it seems to me like, oh my God, that's money grabbing. But from the dev side, I think, oh my God, I'm going to run out of 50,000 nodes fucking fast. And it's that the way that I feel, it's like, yeah, any new game that comes along gets its own node, period. When I first heard of that, I thought that was a great idea. It is kind of a bummer the way that we find out a lot about stuff. For example, we just found out, I think they just updated the Spidertank white paper today to say that now they're having these drop ships for people who want to rent out tanks. And they didn't really talk about those drop ships before, not really. And I know when you guys are, and so that's more money that people need to buy if you want to rent out tanks. But the same thing goes with the nodes. It's like, okay, we thought everything was going to run on the regular nodes. Oh, now we have these town nodes and Spider Tank nodes and so on. Oh, now we're going to have something else. And that's the only bummer about being along for the ride. It would certainly be nice to have things like this to show people why you have to make certain decisions.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And yeah, I mean, it's all I could really say is, like it's definitely not like a how much money can we squeeze out of people thing. It is, like how can we make this work? How can we make economies work? How can we make, like you say, resources work? So, beyond that, that's definitely above my pay grade. But yeah, I mean, it's people who are here early, are learning some things with us, and that's sort of the it's a double-edged sword sometimes, right? Like there's a lot of benefits to being early and finding out things early and getting in on things early, but it's not always a smooth ride. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. But it's a really cool. I mean, to me, that paradigm is really amazing and cool. Like I don't know, it's what really drew me in to
I
Gala to begin
personally
with.
like it.
Is
I
I do
like
too.
the idea of seeing everything that you guys get to do. And frankly, I'm going to totally admit this. I'm looking to see if this show can dig into some of the more technical stuff with these games so that I can get a closer idea about how you guys are putting the stuff together. It's really interesting stuff that you guys are doing, and frankly, you guys are too busy to show us. And well,
Yeah.
okay, I don't work for you, so at least we can make it easier for you to tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I'm glad to be able to share. You're not wrong. It's very hard for us to kind of like escape from the weeds to really like kind of collect, enough thoughts to put something coherent right in front of you guys, because that's the thing. I don't want to just come on here and like be scatterbrained, and although I may have come off
That's
that way anyways,
that's
but
what AMA. See, that's what I don't like about AMAs, because they just pop on. They're like, "Hey guys, we're here. We'll answer any question you want." And then you start talking, and they're like, "I don't know. I don't know." I mean, it's you don't need to prepare for AMAs. You don't need to have your brain on for AMAs. You just go, I think we better be quiet about that one. Bullshit.
no,
Okay, I don't want you here if we're
Yeah.
not going to talk about shit.
We
it's
we
tough.
just like
Yeah,
to sit around and bullshit with people and ask questions and have a conversation.
yeah,
I did notice, I don't want to ignore the chat here. We had two really good questions, and I'm not sure if you're aware of these things. If not, just say so. But the first question that we had was what will secure the chain.
What will secure the chain?
Is there
Right. So
more to
I can
that?
assume like
Maybe because they're worried because it's a
there...
private chain. They want to know there's
Yeah.
some sort of public key or publicly or key held by multiple people to make sure that you guys are technically not in charge, even though you kind of are at the moment because it's so early because you're still making the chain.
Yeah. Well, so I'll pull the standard soon. There's some really cool work going on around that right now.
They don't
but
have
yeah,
any
I can't
locks
get-
on the
I can't get
doors
into
right
it.
now, guys. They will eventually. That's why it's not out.
Yeah,
And-
it is part of
and-
it, right? Yeah.
So with that, it hasn't been implemented yet, but there's been a few conversations I've seen in some of the channels. What about bug bounties? Is there going to be any bug bounties that Gala will offer?
Embrace your
Or do you guys
hackers.
have like private security doing that for you?
Yeah, I mean that's not really my wheelhouse. So yeah, I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
I would like that.
I have
Fair
some
enough.
ideas. But that's not really my area.
Well,
so I don't
my
want to
two
speak out of
cents-
turn on that
My
one.
2 cents on bug bounties is if you do not plan for getting the shit hacked out of you, you're doing it wrong. Because I mean, people, this coin has a lot of potential, and people know this, and so that they're going to be poking. And every time that there's some sort of mint or some new sale going on, inevitably something goes wrong because some bad actor's gone there and done something. So I think it's best to embrace it. Say, fine, hack us. We'll give you money.
Yeah, I mean, from a personal standpoint, from a development standpoint, I'm with you there.
It shows how
I'm just-
robust your systems are too, because you'd be like,
I totally agree. Yeah.
As we wrap up, I know we've kept you for a little over an hour already.
Wow, that went fast.
Yeah, it did. Well, I'm telling you, that's why you got to come back.
That's right.
But I try and, at least from my standpoint, as we're wrapping up, I try and ask a more personal question. So, for you, what drove picking the name Jehosephat?
Oh man, that's actually a childhood nickname. I had some younger cousins, and I don't know if they're just watching cartoons or whatever, but they just started calling me.
Were they named
Jehosephat.
Jesus, Mary, and then you? That's
What's that?
my relatives used to say Jesus, Mary, Jehosephat.
They were using it as like jumping Jehosephat, although I cannot jump more than maybe a half inch off the ground. So I don't know why, but it just kind of stuck with me, and then I started using it, online and in games and such. So yeah, so there you have it. It's I guess not a very interesting origin story, but yeah, it's always worked.
No,
for me.
that's awesome. That is really awesome.
Well, something else we'd like to do to kind of wind this down is we do a weekly game night, at least a twice weekly game night show, but we missed one of them earlier this week. And we were hoping that you could play a game of Spidertanks with us.
I'd be honored. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm going to do, because I effed up on the resolution on this, is I was just going to shut this stream down and start up a game nights stream so I could fix the resolution in the meantime, or else it'll be hard to see the tanks.
Yeah, right on.
So I just want to wrap up and say I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm hoping to do more of these tech talks. I'm hoping that Gala Games and the other studios that work with Gala Games would be interested in doing these. And I'm planning to come back with a more branded looking screen and not blurry the next time. So that was a total accident. Though, now that I think about it, it does add a little element of mystery. So all those
Next time you're gonna have it all fixed, but I'm just gonna start posting blurry pictures, and you won't know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do it, man. Do it. Totally mess with him that way.
And all
you.
you theory crafters can believe what you want. How's that?
Yeah. Perfect.
Anyway, thank you very much, and I think we're going to shut this one down, and then we'll start up the game.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys, and keep it up. I think everybody digs what you're doing. So
Thank you very much.
Very cool. Thanks for coming on.
I'll talk to you soon, guys.